My golden child sister got everything growing up, until I served her cold revenge at my wedding. Growing up, my life was a never-ending saga of being overshadowed by my sister, the apparent golden child. It felt like my parents had a favorite child handbook, and I wasn't in it. If she said I did something wrong, my parents didn't even hesitate, they'd just believe her and slap me with a punishment. But if I ever pointed out her mess-ups, even with rock-solid proof, she'd get off easy, and they'd somehow twist it around to scold me too. On my birthday, the cake would always be her favorite, and my mom and dad would act all confused about why I didn't like it. When it came to gifts and family outings, they always chose what she wanted, even when it was supposed to be about celebrating me. My sister was definitely spoiled and seemed to use me as her personal punching bag. At first, she just ignored me, but once we hit our teenage years, things shifted for the worse. She ended up losing her friends, and I noticed because we went to the same school. Suddenly, I was the target of her frustration. She realized I was pretty popular and seemed determined to ruin that for me. She'd accuse me and my friends of all sorts of stuff, and my parents stopped letting me hang out with anyone, using lame excuses like they're not good people, or why can't you be more like your sister and spend time with family. The only thing that saved me from being a total loner was my extended family. Most of them lived nearby, and my cousins and I got along well, despite some age gaps. At some family gathering, they asked why I couldn't come to something, and little me just blurted out that it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. Later, I found out that my uncles and aunts had given my parents a piece of their mind over that one. Sure, I got in trouble for lying and was grounded, but after that, my parents eased up a bit, so I guess it was worth it. My sister ended up switching schools, probably because the idea of our whole family knowing she had no friends was too much for her to handle. My parents went along with it, even though it was a hassle and cost them more. At her new school, she made some friends, but that didn't mean she left me alone. She'd tasted the power of messing with me and wasn't ready to give it up. Her new friends would come over and tease me, but my parents dismissed it as harmless fun. I never dared to bring my friends home because my parents were awful hosts, and my sister would accuse them of stealing, which, of course, my parents believed. Fortunately, I got closer to my cousins, as they were family, and my parents couldn't treat them the same way. Then came my first boyfriend. I didn't want to introduce him to my family, but my parents insisted. One day, as we hung out, my boyfriend came to find me, looking a bit weirded out. He told me that my sister had been trying to hit on him, wearing revealing clothes, batting her eyelashes, and saying how bad I was compared to her. He was put off and came straight to me. Naturally, my sister spun a different tale for my parents, that my boyfriend had tried to flirt with her, but she rebuffed him because she wouldn't do that to me. Who did my parents believe? Not me, that's for sure. My boyfriend wasn't perfect, but given all the unfair treatment I'd endured, I believed him. I hated my sister as much as she hated me, so it was easy to take his side. Not to brag, but I'd always been on the skinnier side, thanks to all the times I was punished with no snacks. My sister, however, was a bit on the heavier side, much like my parents, who showed love through food. Personality is what really matters, and my sister's wasn't exactly winning any awards. She never learned how to work for anything because she just demanded, and my parents delivered. Even her attempts at flirting were weak. So, even in my moody, self-conscious teenage state, I didn't think my boyfriend would ditch me for her. My parents banned me from dating him, labeling him a terrible influence. I tried to keep it going in secret, but eventually, it fizzled out. I got another boyfriend later, but it was déjà vu. My sister tried her same routine, and again, my parents bought into her lies, deciding I just couldn't make good choices when it came to guys. My relationship hit the rocks, but my story? Well, that's only just getting started. So, I just couldn't deal with being in a Romeo and Juliet kind of setup, so I bailed again. Eventually, in high school, people started calling me names. I was cool with kissing boys and all, but I wasn't interested in relationships. Thankfully, my sister and parents never found out about any of this. During all this drama, my sister brought a boyfriend home. He was practically worshipped by my family. My parents couldn't stop singing his praises and kept questioning why I couldn't be like her and find someone like that. But then he disappeared, and suddenly he was just a conniving bastard who tricked my sister. Oh well, the unfair treatment kept rolling. My sister had more spending money and better curfews, and she could go wherever she wanted, whenever she wanted. If I dared to point this out, my parents would shrug it off, saying it was because she was older. But when I reached her age, nothing changed for me. They either denied ever saying that or claimed I wasn't as trustworthy, using my sister's problems with my boyfriend and friends as evidence of my bad judgment. Fast forward to my sister's graduation. She got into a college, not a top-tier one and without a scholarship. I only heard about her success stories and didn't even know which colleges she applied to. Her grades weren't great, but we celebrated any time she got a B. I would consistently get good grades, yet my parents didn't make a fuss, saying there was nothing to celebrate since I always did well. Then it was announced they'd cover all her college expenses. I was relieved she'd be away, but still, my life didn't get any easier. She'd come home every other weekend, and mysteriously, my stuff would go missing or she'd find new ways to make my life miserable. My curfews remained strict. When it was my turn to talk about graduation, my mom sat me down. Since they were funding my sister's college, they said they didn't have money for mine. I was told to work right after graduation and maybe, just maybe, after my sister graduated, they could help. Plus, if I stayed home, I'd have to cover my expenses, including rent. I suggested student loans, but my mom insisted they decide if a college was worth the debt because they cared so much about my bad judgment. I didn't argue. I simply said okay, which surprised my mom. She cried, maybe hoping for a meltdown from me. I just thanked her for caring. My dad tried the same talk, but I stayed calm. After years of crappy parenting, I had zero expectations for my education from them. I knew they'd bail on helping me, so I'd been preparing for college on my own. My life was pretty low-key, so I studied a lot, seeing college as my ticket to freedom. I worked hard, landed a solid scholarship, not Ivy League or anything, but still decent and fully covered. Knowing my sister might try to sabotage me through my parents, I posted about my success on social media while telling them, even thanking them in the post. They couldn't stop me then without facing questions from our extended family. At first, they seemed a bit proud but then changed their tune, thanks to my sister. They even asked if I was sure I wanted to go. They hinted that my sister was struggling in college and, since she supposedly had better judgment, my path would be tougher. I stuck to my plans, though. They weren't happy but couldn't do anything about it. College was my escape. I began feeling happy, still keeping in touch with my parents and visiting during holidays, but since they weren't funding anything, I had good reasons not to visit often. So, back when money was tight, I kept my distance from introducing any guy to my family, and my sister ended up dropping out of college. I know she didn't graduate because if she had, my folks would have thrown a huge fuss about it. She moved back home, not paying rent or anything, but my parents just said, "Oh, it's different." She got a job at the same place as my mom, obviously with mom pulling some strings. They were super proud of it, like it was this major achievement or something. Around that time, I met my now husband. You know those people who always say, if I were in that situation, I'd totally do something, but never do? Well, my husband is actually the guy who does. Meanwhile, I'm usually the quiet, passive type who stays up all night wishing I'd come up with something clever to say. I'm that person who ends up in tears when I'm mad. My husband, on the other hand, never misses a beat. He thrives on drama and is all about resolving it. If he doesn't immediately snap back at a slight, you should be worried because he's plotting something even better for payback. He's the one who wanted me to share this here and even considered posting it on some revenge site, but we figured what we did wasn't that extreme. People couldn't believe we got together, but just because I wasn't like him didn't mean I didn't admire those traits. I love that he stands up in ways I can't and that he's decent to people who treat him well. When we talked about getting married, we didn't mind going simple on the ceremony because we wanted to splash out on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. Since his family was all over the place and mine mostly still lived in my hometown, we figured we'd have the wedding there. Plus, we lived close enough to make long weekend trips to organize things, and our jobs were flexible enough to let us crash at my parents' if needed. After sending out our engagement announcement and save the dates for a few months later, my parents insisted on meeting my fiancée. I wanted to stand up to them but struggled because the distance had made me forget how tough they could be. My husband seemed so disappointed when I told him about the meeting, but he didn't want them meeting him alone. He was actually looking forward to it, plotting all these ways to shut down my sister if she tried anything. He even got this sneaky recorder to catch everything. When he got back, he was all excited and was like, "Babe, you won't believe what they tried to pull." I was curious about the recording, but he thought it was better if he just explained first. Turns out, instead of any flirting from my sister, my parents and she sat him down to announce that they'd cover our wedding costs, but only if my sister got to walk down the aisle first. In a wedding dress. At my wedding. Their logic was, since she was older, she should get to experience it, complete with pictures and a cake, even if it wasn't her actual wedding. Now my husband's gonna take over. Hey, it's the hubby here. Listen, I browse all those revenge and karma sites, and when my lady gets disrespected, it's on. Anyway, my brain kind of stalled when they laid out that whole ridiculous plan like it was some grand gesture. After I processed it, my instinct was to rip into them, but something just told me to play along. I said I needed to think it over, see how my then fiancé felt about it, and booked it out of there to start scheming. Back to me, the wife, so my husband told me everything with this big grin and played the recording. I was floored. Time apart from my family had softened my memory of their nonsense, and I didn't think they'd stoop so low. Luckily, my husband's focus on getting back at them kept me from spiraling. So, we had a blast brainstorming all these crazy schemes to mess with them. Some ideas were totally out there and others seemed doable. We even got his super chill brother involved to discuss our plan, which was all about giving them the wrong venue address and stuff. The level-headed brother basically told us off and pointed out that pulling off a stunt like that would be tough. Plus, some of our other ideas could have landed us in legal trouble. In the end, we decided on a pretty harmless plan. Just act like we were going along with everything, but hire security and not let her in. Of course, that alone wouldn't be much of a revenge story. My husband cooked up most of the plans, but he wanted me to share, so here it goes. All of his actions were things we had talked about together, and they were our shared ideas. He went back to my parents and made it seem like he wasn't sure I'd be okay with the plan. But he said he didn't see the big deal, and to keep the family peace, he'd help them out. He mentioned that I'm not big on conflict, so if I was caught off guard, I might not make a scene in front of everyone. But since marriage is a big deal, who knows how I'd react. So, he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff, making me feel even more pressured not to say anything. Not only would we be out there with our families, but I'd feel grateful for their help. My parents looked shocked, and my sister got super excited. So they went for it. Here's the kicker, my husband played the part, saying they were all my ideas and that I was proud of using their own words against them. According to him, I was controlling and always checking his phone to make sure he wasn't cheating. So, keeping everything off the record was a must. For anything about my sister walking down the aisle before me, he'd go over there in person. Thus began our months-long charade while they thought they were outsmarting me, but we were actually milking them. They ended up not paying for the wedding. My parents wanted to weigh in on everything, even stuff that mattered a lot to me, like songs and colors. My husband would convince them to back off, to keep me in check, but since we weren't all that fussed about the ceremony, everything else was fair game, at least they thought so. We went along to check the drink and menu options, then picked the cheapest or second cheapest. My husband would secretly take my sister to try things, acting all regretful we couldn't get the best options due to cost. Cue my sister pushing my parents to cover the best options, who then told me not to worry. Same strategy for the photographer and flowers, he'd hand my sister a bouquet I liked but claim I wanted something else. Of course, my parents insisted on covering the nicer ones. The wedding dress was a slight hitch. My parents wanted me to wear a dress that wasn't my style. The plan was to say yes and just not wear it, but my mom texted me about it. I stuck to my guns, refused to text, and my husband handled it. My sister even suggested wrecking the dress I wanted so I'd have no choice, and he played along. During all this, we kept everything off text. I'd respond whenever my sister messaged my husband, which fit the controlling and paranoid image he painted. Some people might not like their partner talking badly about them to family, but I found it hilarious being seen as controlling and dangerous. It was all part of the plan, and I egged him on. I guess I have a twisted sense of humor. By the way, my sister tried to flirt with him, but he played the conflicted husband, selling the whole act. He never let on that we hired security. Honestly, my husband and I, who really considered the whole situation, just laughed about it all. Originally, we planned to keep things simple with a courthouse wedding so we could save up and splurge on an epic honeymoon. But somehow, we ended up with a fancy, costly ceremony and barely spent anything ourselves. We jokingly called it payback for all the emotional drama my parents put us through. Fun fact, my husband was way more into the chaos than the wedding prep. I never imagined seeing a guy so hyped about wasting a whole Saturday on a road trip with the in-laws to hash out wedding details, but there he was. Fast forward to the big day. The genius plan my parents, sister, and husband cooked up was to kick off the ceremony once everyone was seated. You know how brides are usually fashionably late? Well, my sister was supposed to swoop in right on cue so I wouldn't catch her and make a fuss. The idea was that by the time I figured out what was going on, it would all be too late to stop. As for my wedding dress, we saved some leftover fabric from the alterations. My husband showed this to my family, pretending like the dress was ruined, and told them he was heading back to calm me down before everything kicked off. They didn't suspect a thing. We kept our real security team under wraps. When the guests and my parents showed up, all they saw was a woman with a guest list. It wasn't until they were settled in that we brought out the real deal, a guy who looked like he could moonlight as a bodyguard. We'd promised him a nice tip if he kept our instructions secret and didn't let my sister in. As my parents got a text that my sister was 5 minutes away, my dad signaled for the ceremony to start. My bridesmaids were prepped to follow his lead, so they did without checking in with me. After everyone was in place, my dad waited at the entrance, expecting my sister. Meanwhile, a friend who wasn't in on the bridal party texted me to be ready. This friend was just as eager for drama as my husband, so they didn't mind missing out on bridesmaid duties. When the music hit and the doors opened, my dad looked gobsmacked to see me walking down the aisle instead of my sister. He tried to peek behind me, but from his angle, he had no clue what happened to my sister. Then his phone rang. It was her. Mumbling something about an emergency, he ditched me at the altar. The room filled with gasps and confusion. Our friend jumped in with a loud, "What just happened?" And I, trying not to cry, fibbed that my dad said I wasn't supposed to be there. My husband and I had agreed that if my dad bailed, I'd say that to make him look bad. Our friend played along, asking loudly what he meant by "it shouldn't be you," so folks could hear and speculation would spread. Then she ran out, supposedly to check on things, causing even more chaos and preventing my dad from coming back to halt the ceremony. Eventually, my mom left too. My father-in-law quickly dashed over to walk me down the aisle, having been tipped off about the shenanigans. His eagerness made me smile. So, I made it to my husband amid the whispers about what had gone down. Some guests left to see the drama unfold, but I was just happy to be there with him. He comforted me, cracking jokes that my sad face could win an Oscar, and promised to handle my parents later. We got hitched without any more interruptions. My parents never came back, and I noticed a lot of folks drifting in and out during the reception, but no one wanted to clue me into the drama outside. At some point, someone whispered something to my husband, and he stepped out. When he returned, he looked thunderous, but he whispered that he had to hide his grin before he blew our cover. The breakdown, according to reports from friends, family, security, and my husband, went like this. My sister showed up in a wedding dress, only to be blocked by the bodyguard, who told her she must have the wrong place since there was already a bride inside. We gave him a nice tip for sticking to the plan. My dad, acting all big, threatened to call the cops, arguing the guard wasn't legit. The guard, cool as a cucumber, offered to call the police himself since he was just doing his job. Realizing time was slipping by, my dad demanded they let my sister in, but at that point, our loud friend arrived, calling my sister names and stalling the scene further. My mom and more folks caught up, just in time to see that their plan was unraveling. So, things totally went sideways with my parents' plan, and they were left scrambling to clean up the mess. Everyone who found out about their scheme was stunned and super horrified that they even thought it could work. People started yelling and criticizing them immediately. My parents and sister, trying to save face, insisted it wasn't a secret and bizarrely blamed my husband. When he was dragged into it, my husband played it cool, acting all confused and denying everything. He even tossed in a cheeky gaslight, gatekeeper, girl boss, LOL moment. He called their plan ridiculous and demanded proof, which, of course, they didn't have. The only texts they could dig up were about regular wedding stuff. Meanwhile, my sister lost it, going full drama queen, screaming, crying, even throwing a tantrum on the floor. My dad looked like he was about to throw a punch at my husband, but luckily, security and some guests stopped him. My parents claimed they had no written proof because my husband supposedly told them not to text. My husband found that pretty convenient and laughed it off, questioning why he'd agree to something so bonkers. He really let them have it about being awful parents and made it clear he wouldn't let their crazy antics ruin our big day. Then he just walked back to me, totally unfazed. Nobody believed my parents, and while the venue had cameras, they wouldn't show me the footage. But a few people caught parts on their phones. Watching my family get publicly called out was oddly satisfying after years of being wrongly accused of stuff myself. It was like karma in action, and honestly, it felt like the best wedding gift ever. My mom was sobbing, my dad looked like a chameleon changing colors, and my sister was still on her dramatic floor show. They kept insisting my husband was in on it, but everyone kept asking why he'd ever agree and why there was zero proof. They had no sensible answers, so eventually, they were kicked out. Despite all this drama, everyone was super sweet to me all night, maybe because they wanted to keep the bride happy. Plus, my husband joked that all the fancy food and drinks we splurged on probably helped lighten the mood. We ended up having an amazing time. My husband only kept up the fake angry act for a bit before he was all smiles again. Afterward, we hit the hotel for some much needed sleep before jetting off on our honeymoon. Speaking of which, when my parents offered to pay for our plane tickets, we declined. We didn't want to risk them pulling anything shady like trying to cancel them. Since then, my parents and sister have been trying to reach out, but I've been ignoring their calls on my husband's advice to keep a paper trail. Smart move there. My sister eventually messaged me with some wild, incoherent rant, blaming me for her embarrassment, calling my husband a two-faced snake, and even suggesting he was cheating on me with her. My husband found that so ridiculous he wanted to frame it as a joke. He took screenshots of everything, call logs, crazy messages from my sister, and demands from my parents. He sent it all to our family group chat, along with messages they sent him full of insults and threats. He kept playing the "you're delusional, I never agreed to anything" card and even threatened legal action for defamation and harassment. In the group chat, he basically begged my family to help stop my parents and sister from ruining our honeymoon after they tried to wreck our wedding. He also asked them not to share our whereabouts to prevent my sister from showing up and causing more chaos. Thankfully, our family promised to handle it, and we've had some peace since then. My husband's a bit bummed my sister didn't act out again, because he was ready for round 2 of calling her out. Overall, while I wish I could have had a normal and loving family at my wedding, at least, this time, they didn't succeed in ruining something important to me. And hey, I got a bit of payback, which felt pretty good. As for why they treat me this way, that's a mystery I've been trying to solve my whole life. I've asked them before, but they just played dumb and scolded me for even asking. You know, I used to put a lot of effort into trying to figure out why I was treated differently, but I eventually just gave up. I've thought about so many different reasons, and I've got this hunch that it's because I was, well, a bit of a surprise. My sister came along after a long wait, and she was pretty much the miracle child they had been hoping for. But then, bam! We came pretty close together in age, and I guess they weren't planning on another kid showing up so soon. Maybe they weren't careful enough after having my sister, and my mom ended up pregnant again without them realizing it until it was too late. That's probably why they felt stuck with another unplanned baby while trying to handle a newborn at the same time. Plus, money was tight, so having another kid wasn't exactly easy on the wallet, and I think they might have secretly resented me for it. But hey, that's just my take on things. No matter what their reasons were, the way they treated me was definitely not cool. It's like, what were they even thinking? My husband and I have this theory that my parents never really planned on following through with an offer they made when I was getting married. You see, my sister had a bit of a meltdown because I got hitched before she did, and she wasn't exactly swimming in dates. So, maybe my parents made my husband a crazy offer, assuming we'd never go for it. By doing that, they could act like the heroes in my sister's eyes while ducking out of paying for my wedding. But plot twist. My husband actually said yes, and they were stuck because backing out would have made my sister upset with them. Anyway, thanks for sticking around to hear my story. If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell to catch more wild stories from real life happening around you.